We're pleased now to welcome back to the show Ron Kaufman, who is the author of the New York Times bestseller Uplifting Service and chairman of the service culture development company Up Your Service. Ron was on the show in January to talk about excellence in customer service, and our text lines went into meltdown. It's a very hot topic here, customer service. So welcome back, Ron. Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure to be back, Malcolm. Thank you.
We'll be gentle with you. We know you flew in at 4 o'clock this morning from Singapore, where you live.
I did, but I had a wonderful flight on Emirates, and so I'm in good shape to be with you today.
Right. You're not sponsored by Emirates, I hope. For those that weren't listening in January, though, Ron, give us 3 takeaways on customer service to kick us off that every company really ought to be putting into practice.
So the first thing is that to build a culture of service is essential to differentiate from the competition, to keep customers coming back, and that's a leadership responsibility. It's a responsibility of a leadership team and individual leadership team members to build a culture of service. Takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2 is that you've got to enable your team members, right down to the very lowest frontline level staff. And enabling means that you take responsibility for educating, coaching, mentoring, advising, even when they make a mistake, that you don't just beat them up, but you're actually there to use that as an opportunity. And that's tip number 3, is that when things go wrong, and they will go wrong in life, that oops can actually be turned into an opportunity. Because if you recover well, if you really respond to customers who have been inconvenienced in some way, you can bounce their loyalty back to a higher level than if it had never happened before.
And Ron, over the long term, this is all great. On the short term, I'm sure lots of chief executives and the senior managers think, okay, yeah, let's put this strategy in place, and your key takeaways there were very pertinent. But how do you sustain it over the long term? Because that's the real challenge.
Yeah, there's 2 parts of that. One is, why sustain it over the long term? And the profitability shows the results. So if you look at Singapore Airlines or the Ritz-Carlton Hotel or Amazon.com or Apple Computer, they have this reputation for having developed a very strong culture of service, a great customer experience, and the dollars and cents will follow. But how do you build that culture so that it will sustain over time? There's an architecture. Now, when people hear the word culture, they often think it's sort of the soft and fuzzy thing about business. We take a completely different approach. You can engineer the development of a strong and sustainable service culture, but then you have to get the architecture right. You have to know how the methodology works. You have to know what the fundamental components are and how they fit together.
I think one of the things about this part of the world, about the Middle East, is that in general, business structures are quite autocratic. That the manager says, do this, and it gets done, and people pass orders down the chain. That at no point in that chain will one person say, okay, I can accept people below me, my subordinates, in making that mistake and absorbing it. I think there's a sort of zero mistake culture here. Do you think that's the wrong thing?
Well, I think it's changing, and I think that's a good thing that it is changing, because a pure top-down autocratic culture has been shown in history to not survive. What happened to the Soviet Union? What's happening around in other places around the world. And so if you're a commercial organization, what you actually want to do is harness the creativity. You want to harness the willingness and the passion of people at all different levels. And that's why building a service culture is important, because you want each and every person, no matter where they are, which position, what role, what level, to say, my job is not just to do what I'm told. My job is to take action that will create value for someone else. And that's our definition of service, taking action to create value. When you build an entire culture where everybody understands that's why I'm coming to work, then you have much less concern about doing just what the boss said. You're going to do what's the appropriate thing for the other person that you're serving.
And what exact steps can you put in place? Say I'm a senior executive, I'm listening to you and I think, okay, this is a great idea, but how do you create that conduit between your frontline staff, as you put them, and you to ensure that this service culture is built up?
Well, I have to dive in here. I mean, the first thing I would recommend to any leader is come to the Service Leadership Workshop that I'll be teaching on March 12th here in Dubai. It's a full-day program that'll answer that question. But the essentials are this. You educate people on fundamental principles of how to deliver a great service experience. You give them the protection of a great set of service leadership behaviors that everyone in a leadership position understands and actually behaves and role models every day. And then you surround your people with what's called the 12 building blocks of uplifting service culture. So you're hiring the right people, you're recognizing people the right way, you're constantly communicating about service, you're capturing voice of the customer, you've got benchmarking going on. There are 12 different building blocks, and that's why it takes a full day to cover them. But those are the methodological elements to build a culture of service that's strong and sustainable.
You're based in Singapore, and I know that you've been doing a lot of work over the years with one company that is recognized globally for its high service levels and high customer satisfaction, and that's Singapore Airlines. In your 2012 book, Uplifting Service, you talk about benchmarking beyond your competition. In other words, compare yourself to every industry and not just your peer group. And in the book, you use SQ, Singapore Airlines, and Changi Airport as examples of that. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by benchmark beyond your competition?
Benchmarking outside your competition.
Yeah.
So take, for example, Changi International Airport is rated as the #1 most awarded airport on the planet. And they've earned that right because they do so many innovative things. One of the interesting things that they recently did is they installed a 4-story slide inside the transit area. So if you're traveling with children, the kids will go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down until they're very tired, which means on the next flight they will sleep, and everybody will appreciate that. Changi Airport installed a butterfly garden because when people are traveling, there's always a certain amount of stress, but if you have some time and you go sit with the butterflies, you're going to relax. Well, nobody ever wrote to the airport and said, please install a slide in a butterfly garden. Yeah. So where did they get those ideas? What they did is they benchmarked outside of airports, and they said, now what are other environments where families go with young people that need to have their energy consumed and be entertained? Of course, it would be theme parks. They came up with the slide. What's another environment where people have a certain amount of stress, families come together, you often have to wait, and, well, it would be a hospital. And what do hospitals do? They build gardens. And why do they build gardens? Because it's a relaxing place. And when you have flowers in a garden, you get butterflies. So Changi Airport went right to the point, and they put in the slide, they put in the butterflies by benchmarking outside of airports.
Fantastic. I think the slide also, I'm taking it forward a little bit, that it could be used instead of a departure gate. You get people on a lot faster. Take them to the top of the slide and push them off straight into the plane.
Well, especially customers like you, Malcolm, who want to be nasty. We'll just push you right off there.
Now, gentlemen. Now.
I think, I know that Trevor's got an interesting point about industries.
Yeah, and this is just more of a personal observation from living in Dubai. I found that certain industries really get it right and other industries get it wrong. In my own personal experience, I find hotels particularly, and arguably a lot of the airlines here in this part of the world really get the service. They get it spot on in most cases. However, banks, and particularly my bank, which I won't mention, seem to just get it incredibly wrong. And why is it that certain industries seem to get it right and others get it wrong? Is it down to industries, or is it the culture in these individual companies?
It's both, but let's take a look at the industry side first. The ones that you mentioned in terms of airlines or hospitality, hotels, they're dealing with international customers all the time. So they're always having to compare themselves with what's the service experience that somebody's having in another part of the world. Whereas when you look at something like a local bank or a global bank that has a national office, they're dealing with a local population, and so they may not see as much of that standard spread, that high level of expectation that naturally would come in from overseas. But having said that, in every industry, there will always be some company that takes the challenge of differentiating based on service. And one great example here in Dubai is Giordano's, where I remember I've been coming to Dubai now for 20 years running these leadership workshops, and they were one of the first that really said, we're going to differentiate. Of course, we have great clothing. Of course, we have good pricing. Of course, we're well located, but the experience that you get when you come to our store is going to be different and better than everybody else, and that has stood them in good stead because they are still able to now attract the best and most motivated and passionate staff. And it's not that they're paying them more, Trevor. It's that they've created a culture of uplifting service where people want to come and work and they want to stay.
I think, it's an interesting sort of definition really between companies which rely on their service, where the service is the product, and that is obviously the hospitality industry to a certain degree. You don't go back to places that you've been mistreated. Whereas retail, here if you go into shops, quite often we get complaints that the person you're talking to doesn't know anything about the product, and as Trevor pointed out, they might read off the bottom of the box for you, which you can perfectly capable of doing yourself. While they're talking to you, they'll go off and serve another customer, or somebody will butt in. You don't really feel particularly wanted when you go into a lot of retail shops here.
Well, I think that this is an amazing moment in Dubai's history because we look forward to 2020. There's going to be an escalation of quality, of standards, of more and more coming in, which means that every single thing that's available in that retail store is probably available in some other retail stores elsewhere around Dubai. And with that kind of choice and that kind of commoditization of products and harmonization combination of pricing, then the service experience gets the opportunity to become the differentiator. And that's why right now is the time when companies should really seize the challenge and say, we're going to become the company that takes the lead in terms of service culture.
Well, somebody's texted in to ask pretty much that. I mean, they say, how do you balance between the quality of manpower, cultural mix, and retention to drive service excellent? And one of the issues, and I think they're kind of alluding to it rather than a direct reference, is the fact that a lot of shop people here in the retail industry don't get paid very much.
That's very true, and that may not change, but it doesn't mean that you can avoid the responsibility as a leader in an organization. If you're listening to this broadcast and you care about business, you must take the responsibility to create the environment where people, even if they're not well paid, still feel well supported. They feel recognized. They feel well educated. They feel encouraged to give good service. You know, there's one of those 12 building blocks I was talking about earlier is called service recognition and rewards. I used to call it service rewards and recognition, but then I realized when you're talking about serving another person, sometimes it's that pat on the back, it's the thumbs up, it's the appreciation that actually has a more powerful emotional impact than getting paid a little more money.
Do you think, though, obviously we have to be honest at the same time, that money's going to be a big obstacle in this case? Because if I'm a low-income worker in a mall, for instance, or wherever it may be, you know, it doesn't matter how much rewards and pats on the back that I may get, it does diminish your spirit to deliver great service.
And that's why it's absolutely critical to keep the best customers coming back. Because if you're going to get paid more, there's only one way to get that, and that means your company has to make more. And there's only one way that your company's going to make more, and that means the customers need to come back, they need to buy more, they need to refer other people. That's the definition of a loyal customer. And you get those and you keep them by building a culture of uplifting service.
And in one of your books, you talk about the 6 levels of service: unbelievable, surprising, desired, expected, basic, criminal. And I can imagine you, because you do quite a lot of traveling, going around the world and sort of marking people up or down mentally as well. Where do you see most people win and most people fail?
Well, where people fail is they don't recognize that those 6 levels of service that you just described, Malcolm, are not stairs. That's an escalator, and it's always going down, which means you may surprise someone with a high level of service today, but tomorrow if you do the same thing, it's not surprising anymore. It's just something very nice. And then a little while later, if you keep doing it, that nice thing has become normal. And then before you know it, normal is no big deal. So in a commercial world where those stairs keep slipping down, there's only one way to stay excellent, and that means you have to keep stepping up, which is why the book is called Uplifting Service, which is why the company is called Up Your Service.
How many times do you sort of mark somebody in the criminal category?
Oh, it happens, unfortunately, from time to time. But I don't mean criminal like breaking the law. What I mean is criminal like you break a service promise. And all of us have done it at some moment in time. You say to somebody, I'll call you back this afternoon. But the evening comes and you never made the call. In the world of that other person, that's criminal. You actually let them down. And that's the kind of behavior that should be completely eliminated.
And I know that Trevor was talking earlier about why better customer service? How much difference does it make to the bottom line?
It makes an enormous difference to the bottom line, because if you can keep customers coming back, if you can keep them buying more, they will give you more of their share of wallet. Your loyal customers will tend to buy your more premium priced packages and products. They'll refer other people. Loyal customers will even defend you when somebody else is on the attack. So if you look at social media today and how easy it is for people to anonymously flame an organization and complain about something, you need loyal customers that will speak up on your behalf. When you've got that kind of customer loyalty coming in, it's also more enjoyable to be the service provider. So you'll naturally attract and keep better employees.
Briefly, Ron, if people want to go to your service leadership workshop or find out more, where can they go?
It's on March 12, and you can go to ronkaufmandubai.com.
That's Kaufman, Kaufman,
Dubai, ronkaufmandubai.com. And I'll see you on March 12 at the Service Leadership Workshop.
Well, Ron, thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to us this morning. Author of the New York Times bestseller, Uplifting Service, chairman of the Service Culture Development Company, Up Your Service. We do appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Pleasure to be with you.